What's up, everybody, and welcome into another episode of That Dynasty Show. We are heading into week 2 after a successful kickoff week in the NFL. Lots of crazy shit went on, couple injuries, couple heartbreakers. I know me as a Panthers fan and Tyler as a Cowboys fan, neither one of us are particularly too happy, but I've got about a 70% winning percentage across my leagues so far. So at least fantasy's going well for me. Tyler, how'd fantasy treat you in week 1?
Dead split down the middle. In the 8 leagues that I care about, at least. 4-4, and not the wins weren't very pretty either. Most of the wins were pretty low scoring. Like I won with like the 6th or 7th highest scoring team in the league, and just happened to play like the lowest scoring team in the league. But a lot of disappointments. But a couple of good calls ended up saving me, and I was happy that they were ones that I actually put out last week for last week's start sit. So while there were some shocking disappointments, I think it overall went pretty well. The guys who I was hoping played well. The guys who I expected to play well didn't. But it was rough news waking up and seeing that Dak Prescott is going to be out until November. That stinks. I have a lot less to be excited about for football this year. But yeah, I mean, fantasy is dead split down the middle. Might be tanking, might be competing. We'll find out in week 4, I guess.
Yeah, dude, my one of the dynasty teams that I built, I'm really excited about it. I've got DeAndre Swift, I got Javonte Williams, AJ Brown, DJ Moore, Josh Allen, Kyle Pitts. Like, this is a beast of a team, and I lost this week. I had the second highest score in the entire league, and I lost by 2 points. Absolute heartbreaker. But you know what? That's the nature of the beast. That's how fantasy football goes. But we'll go ahead and we'll get into our starts and sits for week 2 of the NFL fantasy football season. So as always, we'll start off with these quarterbacks. And I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers going against the Chicago Bears. I believe that's on Sunday Night Football too. And Aaron Rodgers was... I mean, the Packers were abysmal against the Vikings, but there's no way that happens again, right? Like, Aaron Rodgers has famously said that he owns the Bears, and I firmly believe that he does actually own the Bears. I think he's going to go out there. He'll have a nice bounce-back game. Hopefully his rookies stop dropping passes. Hopefully he gets Aaron Jones a bit more involved in the passing game. That was definitely a head-scratcher as to why Jonesy wasn't really too involved. But, hey, it is what it is. But, I think Rodgers is going to go out there. He's going to bounce back pretty well in week 2, and he's definitely worth starting this weekend.
Yeah, I feel like I heard him say at one point that this happened last year, too, that he got off to a slow start and everyone started talking the trash, and he came back to be MVP. But, so my first guy is going to be probably no surprise to anybody who watches this channel, but Kirk Cousins versus Philadelphia. He had a pretty solid week last week, and Philadelphia had a pretty rough game against Detroit. Fantasy-wise, a lot of Detroit was pretty productive, and I think that offense looked better than many people thought it was going to. That offense looked closer to what it should look like on paper, I think, Detroit. But even so, Minnesota's offense is better, and I'm more comfortable relying on Kirk Cousins to repeat that than that act than a guy like a Jared Goff. So I'm gonna feel really comfortable starting Kirk Cousins this week.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a Monday night shootout. I think it's going to be a really fun game to watch, honestly. You know, Justin Jefferson is going to make a case for the overall MVP, not just Offensive Player of the Year in 2022, especially by the looks of week 1. So expect him to have a big game. And every time he has a big game, obviously Kirk Cousins is going to have a half-decent stat line as well. So definitely like that call. My next start is I'm going back to the well. I said to start Matt Stafford last week. Wasn't the right call, but I'm going to say to start Matt Stafford this week against the Falcons. This is a big bounce back opportunity. It's a get right game for the entire Rams offense. Allen Robinson, he was really disappointing last week, but I think that's going to change this week. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is going to keep going up. Tyler Higbee had like 11 targets last week, which is absolutely absurd. But I think Stafford is going to have a significantly easier time navigating the Falcons than he did the Bills. Like I said, good bounce back opportunity. And much like Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to take him. I'm going to start him in week 2, and I'm going to feel fairly comfortable with it.
Yeah, man, that Bills defense is really tough, so it's hard to use that as like a standard for what we're going to see throughout the season. But my next quarterback is going to be Carson Wentz versus Detroit. He looks pretty good this past week, a lot better than I think a lot of people thought he was going to. And it's going to be another game with two really poor defenses, and it seems like it's going to be another shootout. I mean, there was a lot of good things that happened for Washington this past week. Jahan Dotson stepped up, even Antonio Gibson, even with all the tomfoolery that's gone on this offseason with him. He even looked really good. I think it's going to be a productive game on both sides of the ball for both offenses, and I don't really see a world where this ends up a 10-17 kind of game. I think it's more so going to be a 27-33 type deal with these two offenses.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of points to have in this one. And Washington's getting creative this year, right? Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, Logan Thomas, even J.D. McKissick, right? That's a hell of a combination. They can roll out a lot of really interesting packages there, right? And it looks like they are actually going to be creative this year. And if Carson Wentz can keep it going, then Washington's actually going to be a pretty fun offense to have for fantasy. So definitely like that call. I'm going to go ahead and get into my first sit. And it's going to be Tua, right? Tua Tagovailoa. I think that's how you say his last name. I can never get it right on the first try. But they're against the Baltimore Ravens. And I think this is going to be more of a defensive battle than anything. I think there's going to be a lot to like in this game if you're a football fan. But I think from the fantasy football side, we're going to kind of just be closing our eyes and hoping for a couple touchdowns here and there. Lamar Jackson's going to have a much harder time scoring against the Dolphins than he did against the Jets. And Tua is obviously going to struggle against the stout Baltimore defense, I think. He's just not a guy that I'm very excited to start. If you're in a super flex league, I mean, I view him as like a super low end QB2 against the Ravens. And again, I mean, there's only 32 quarterbacks. It's kind of hard to pick two different sits each week. So I'm not saying like, yeah, if Tua is your QB2 and that's what you're stuck with in your super flex, like I'm not going to play a random wide receiver over Tua. But in terms of just, the quarterback hierarchy here, Tua is definitely towards the bottom of my list. So I'm going to mark him as a sit against the Ravens.
Yeah, and he looked good this past week too, but we'll see if he can hold it up. My first sit is going to be Daniel Jones against Carolina this week. I mean, he put up 2 touchdowns last week and had a handful of rushing yards. I think he'll actually probably be rushing more throughout the rest of the season, but the whole 2 touchdown thing is not going to happen for long. This New York Giants offense does not operate deep down the field. There's not very much big play opportunities that aren't created by a man named Saquon Barkley. So if he's going to succeed, it's going to be on his coattails. So I'm gonna sit Daniel Jones probably this week and most likely for the rest of the season, and I'll just hop off the train while I can.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let you go ahead and with your second sit. I should have realized this when we before we start the video. I actually have Daniel Jones as my second sit as well, so completely agree with you there. The only thing that I can really add is the Panthers were absolutely gashed by Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and Saquon Barkley is going to do the exact same thing to them. I think teams are going to take a run-first approach against the Panthers. I think teams will be able to do that because, I mean, clearly the offense isn't going to be very competitive unless Ben McAdoo fixes his play calling. So Daniel Jones, I just don't think there's enough opportunity in front of him to label him as anything but a sit.
Yeah, just not enough weapons for him, But I guess it's good we agree on that one. But so next up for me is going to be Ryan Tannehill versus Buffalo. Like we just talked about, Buffalo's a really good defense. We saw what they did to Matt Stafford and how loaded that offense is. Ryan Tannehill does not have the amount of weapons that Matt Stafford does, and he is not the quarterback that he is. And I very much expect Buffalo to repeat a similar type of performance against the Tennessee Titans. I don't really think that they're going to succeed through Ryan Tannehill. He just doesn't have the weapons. I mean, as good as Treylon Burks looked in his first game as a rookie, it's just not going to be enough to compete with this Buffalo defense. They're too loaded.
Yeah, no, I agree with that one. Any quarterback that is playing Buffalo this year, unless they're, a top 5, top 6 elite option, they're going to be kind of hard to trust because we know their offense is tremendous, but their defense is one of the best, if not the best in the league this year. So definitely like the call to fade Ryan Tannehill in week 2. Let's move on to our running backs though. So my first start at the running back position is going to be Darrell Henderson. And, we kind of highlighted the Rams are going to be playing against the Falcons here. This is going to be a game I expect Matt Stafford to bounce back in a big way, and I think the Rams are absolutely going to dominate this game. Cam Akers is nowhere to be seen. He is going to be riding the pine because he was blowing blocking assignments. He was having very low effort play in that Thursday night football game against the Buffalo Bills. And Darrell Henderson actually looked halfway decent. He didn't look like a world breaker out there, but he looked like he could get the job done. And I think he's going to have McVay's favor moving forward, at least in week 2. So I think Henderson is a really good stream option at the running back position. And I think there's going to be a decent amount of garbage time points to go around for Darrell Henderson at the end of this one.
Yeah, and we can expect him to do exactly what he did last year when he was given the opportunity, right? Produce in fantasy and not be very much special on the NFL field. But when he gets that volume, hard to argue against it, right? So my first running back is going to be Chase Edmonds versus Baltimore. And this one's entirely based on the matchup. Baltimore's secondary is insane. It's going to be very tough for Tua to be able to find the ball down the field to Tyreek and to Jalen Waddle like he did this past weekend against New England. But where'd my notes go? Yeah, it's just going to be check down city. Chase Edmonds, he looked really good and efficient in that game against the Pats. I'm riding him for as long as I can. He got plenty of opportunity, and I think Tua is going to have no other options this week than to check it down and hope for the best, hope for one of his guys to make a play.
Yeah, I love that call. And that's why Tua is one of my sits, right? Because that Baltimore secondary is looking pretty good. I know they just lost one of their corners, I think Fuller, actually, to an ACL, which is definitely going to damage them, but it's they're a next man up mentality there and everywhere in the NFL. I think they're going to be just fine. But yes, I do like the Chase Edmonds call there in a tough matchup against the Ravens. My second running back, a guy that we kind of touched base on a little bit when you were talking about Carson Wentz. It's Antonio Gibson. He had 20 PPR points in week 1. He was the third down guy. J.D. McKissick was used very sparingly. Gibson was on the field pretty much constantly for this offense. And as long as they're getting creative, as long as they're firing on all cylinders, Carson Wentz can keep up that level of play that he had in week 1 and get that support from his wide receivers. I think it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for Antonio Gibson. And the Lions gave up a rushing touchdown to Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott, and Jalen Hurts. They let 4 rushing touchdowns up in week 1. And mind you, Miles Sanders has not scored a rushing touchdown or any touchdown for that matter since like midway through the 2020 season. So I think the Lions run defense is going to be one of the ones that you want your fantasy running backs to be playing against this year. So for that reason, Antonio Gibson is a hell of a streamer in week 2.
Yeah, and he was awesome last week. 8 targets, 7 catches, 72 yards for a running back. That sounds like a solid wide receiver 2 stat line. So, and that doesn't include the 60 yards that he had on the ground. Really love Antonio Gibson there. But so my second running back is going to be Mr. Cordell Patterson. Versus the Rams, I imagine that Atlanta is going to be throwing the ball a lot. And I think that he's a good option out of the backfield for them. LA is coming off of a complete garbage football game. But I really do. Cordell Patterson, he just keeps proving it to us time and time again. Since he made the switch to the running back spot, he is the lead guy in Atlanta right now. And he's got such big receiving upside that I'm going to take him again this week versus the Rams. I think he's likely to repeat the volume, right? Because, he's not a guy who's just flashing insane skill. He's just getting all the touches. And, as long as those don't go away, the points aren't going to go anywhere either.
Yeah, and I like the call on CPAT because, Drake London, he looked good, but he has to go against Jalen Ramsey. That's a tall task for any rookie, right? And then Kyle Pitts just did not really meet expectations in week 1. I think he'll do a lot better moving forward, right? But the Rams are going to mark him up heavy. So Cordarrelle Patterson is going to be probably the main focus for the Falcons to get going in this one, because he's going to be the only guy really left open out there. We'll move into our sits of the week for the running back position. And my first one is going to be David Montgomery versus the Packers. Kind of breaks my heart because I was very pro Montgomery this offseason. I was kind of fading the noise. I wasn't listening to what people were saying on Twitter, and I probably should have been, right? I thought his workload was safe, but Khalil Herbert was definitely there. Khalil Herbert actually took 100% of the running back snaps in the red zone. So that's not good for David Montgomery's touchdown upside. Montgomery did have like 3 catches, I think. But again, 3 catches isn't really going to get you far. And if he's not getting any touches within the 10-yard line, that kind of spells a lot of trouble. Plus, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to bounce back in this one, right? I think Packers are going to really drive up the score. I think the Bears are going to have to abandon the run game, and I'm not going to trust David Montgomery to come through with any PPR points like that. So Monty is going to be riding the pine for me in week 2.
Yeah, like you said, that one's a heartbreaker because have a lot of stock in that guy going my 0 RBs this offseason, but it's all right. This one's also a heartbreaker for me to say. My sit running back this week is Ezekiel Elliott. No Dak Prescott. This offense is going to go absolutely nowhere. We've seen it before. We'll see it again. We do not have Andy Dalton in the backfield for Dak Prescott anymore, or rather behind Dak Prescott anymore. Cooper Rush is going to be the guy, and he is not going to be moving the ball very well at all against the Cincinnati defense. It's going to, like you kind of talked about, they're going to have to abandon the run game. It's just not going to be a pretty game for them. That offense does not play well without Dak Prescott, and it's just not a secret that this team's going to load the box. Cincinnati is not going to let Zeke just run for 4 or 5 yards a carry. As good as I think he looked last week, and I think that he kind of looked like a former version of himself in terms of the shape that he was in. The rest of the next couple of weeks for this Dallas offense just looks absolutely terrible, I think, for everybody besides who I think is going to be the check down guy in Tony Pollard. I'm losing a lot of faith and selling out on a lot of these Dallas offensive players for the rest of the season.
See, I still like Dalton Schultz a lot because he did see a big volume from Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush is a fucking noodle arm, right? So I think I do like the check down options in Pollard and Dalton Schultz. But outside of that, I'm very concerned for this Dallas offense. But I know we'll be getting into that a bit more later on in this video. So I'm going to move on to my second running back sit. It's going to be Dameon Pierce going against the Denver Broncos. Obviously, the week 1 usage was disappointing. Rex Burkhead came out, absolutely dominated the backfield, despite Lovie Smith saying that Dameon Pierce was going to be his starter. A lot of us probably started him in leagues where we drafted him because, tons of hype over the last several weeks, right? So definitely disappointing. The Denver Broncos, pretty stout defense. They're really not going to let a lot of things happen on the ground in this one. And I think Houston is going to be playing catch up. Denver wants to go out there and prove that they are going to be a super team this year. I think week 1 was a fluke. I think that the coaching staff just kind of absolutely choked. That should not have been a close game. The Seahawks should not have won it at all whatsoever. But it should not have been a close game. Denver should have taken that one. And I think Denver's going to go out there and they are going to take it from Houston, and Houston's going to have to completely abandon the run game. Dameon Pierce is not going to be anywhere to be found on 3rd downs, and the volume's just not going to be there. So I don't see many ways that you could possibly fit Pierce into a lineup this weekend.
Yeah, that's another disappointing one, right? So hoping you guys might have sold high on that guy when the hype got there. But so my next guy is one that you mentioned earlier, Miles Sanders against Minnesota this week. He scored a touchdown this past week, like you said. It was the first one since 2020 when Trump was president. So I'm not going to rely on Miles Sanders to keep this up because we've seen such regression from him over the last couple of years. I don't have any faith in this being sustainable. It doesn't even really have much to do with the matchup so much as just he's not going to repeat it. He hasn't been able to the last couple of years. He's no matter what opportunity he's gotten, it's never been consistent with him since his rookie year. So I am not only benching Miles Sanders, but I'm also trying to sell him.
Yeah, I would sell high on Miles Sanders if you absolutely can. In dynasty formats, I mean, Dameon Pierce started off pretty slow, right? I would still flip Miles Sanders straight up for Dameon Pierce. I think there are better days ahead for Dameon Pierce, but it's, obviously just not in not in week 2. Good. Moving on over to those wide receivers. And Tyler, you're going to like this one. I'm going to start Allen Robinson versus the Falcons. I don't care that week 1 was disappointing. Well, I do care. I'm disappointed, but he's going to bounce back. I think that Allen Robinson needs to be a part of this game plan. I think McVay knows it. I think Matt Stafford knows it. I know Allen Robinson knows it, right? So I think they're going to go out there and they are going to correct it. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is going to get his. Tyler Higbee is not seeing 11 targets in week 2. We're going to say 4, maybe 4 to 6 max, right? And you can argue that those 5 to 7 that are going to be taken away from Higbee, most if not all of them, should and probably will go to Allen Robinson. Like I said, the Rams are going to use this as a get-right game. They're going to use this to build their offensive weapons some confidence, and I think Allen Robinson's going to be a big beneficiary. So drop week 1. Let's pretend it didn't happen. Let's roll out A-Rob in week 2 pretty confidently against the Falcons.
I saw a meme earlier. It was saying this guy, he was like, when you start Allen Robinson in week 2, and it was a video of a guy pulling a goat out of like a crevice stuck in the street.
I saw that.
As soon as he lets the thing go, dude, it runs right back and falls straight back in. That's the exact boat that I'm going to be in as well. I mean, you can't leave Allen Robinson on your bench, seeing how open he was last week and knowing that offense. It's bound to happen. I mean, if it happened for Julio Jones, it's bound to happen for Allen Robinson, right? But so my first start this week is going to be JuJu against the Chargers. I think that last week's fantasy production wasn't really reflective of what that offense looked like in the first half. The Chiefs pitched an absolute blowout against Arizona last week, and JuJu in the first half looked like he was a preferred target. He had 3 or 4 catches that were for 20 plus yards. One that he fumbled on, which took 2 fantasy points away when you look at the stats, right? But this one, Chiefs versus Chargers, is going to be an absolute blowout. And I'm not expecting the Chiefs to be running the clock in the second half on this one. I'm going to be expecting them to score as many points as they can. And I think even if JuJu is a 10 to 15 to 20% share of that, I'll take what I'm going to get out of that offensive matchup this week.
Yeah, I mean, he had 8 targets last week, and like you said, most of them came in the first half. The Chiefs versus the Chargers, I mean, that's going to be an absolute shootout. I don't know what the over is, but I'm taking the over. I don't care if it's 60. I'm taking the over, right? It's going to be fantasy points galore in this one, so I like the call there. My second start of the week for the wide receiver position, to nobody's surprise, if you've watched this channel before, is going to be Brandon Aiyuk. I know Brandon Aiyuk had 6.5 fantasy points in PPR in week 1, but I mean, dude, that game was underwater. That the Bears 49ers game was quite literally underwater, to the point where the Bears were celebrating by slip and sliding into the end zone at the very end of the game. So I'm not counting week 1 against anyone on the Bears side or the 49ers side. This is going to be a big one. San Francisco, they were heavy favorites to go there and beat the Bears. And I would imagine they're fairly decent favorites to go and beat Seattle. I think they are playing at home, which is good. But Brandon Aiyuk, especially now that Elijah Mitchell is out with injury for the next 2 months, Debo is going to have even more of a rushing role than we're used to seeing. And Aiyuk is basically going to be the wide receiver 1 there in that offense, at least for the next several weeks. George Kittle is still out, right? So take out Elijah Mitchell, take out George Kittle. Who else are they going to throw the ball to, right? It's only going to be Debo, and it's going to be Brandon Aiyuk. And I think Aiyuk is going to find a ton, an absolute ton of opportunities in this one. So looking for this as a Trey Lance get right kind of breakout game, and Brandon Aiyuk's going to be a big beneficiary of that.
And I'm hoping so, right? Because I actually just picked him up in a couple spots. But my second guy is going to be Devin Duvernay against Miami. He had 2 touchdowns this past week. And this is a guy who, well, when you look at his offense, a lot of people have been really high on Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman only got 5 targets this past week. Devin Duvernay is a guy who, I mean, when you watch the game, Lamar Jackson clearly enjoys his company. and definitely counts on him to make plays and fight after he catches the ball. This is just one that I wanted to point out that I was right on. So we can move on after that. But yeah, I don't expect him to catch for 34 touchdowns this year and keep that pace up. But I do think he's going to be a significant part of this offense. And if you can find a spot for him in a flex play, where if you're in a bad spot, if you're one of those teams that got a couple injuries, I think Devin Duvernay will be serviceable for you.
See, and I like that you bring up Devin Duvernay as a sit, because it's a perfect segue, or a start, because it's a perfect segue to our sits, where Devin Duvernay is actually a sit for me. So viewers, sorry, we're probably confusing you a little bit here. I'm not sold on Devin Duvernay at all. Bateman did not have enough involvement. Mark Andrews only had 7 targets on the day, 5 catches for 52 yards. Pretty good, but again, it was kind of in a blowout fashion. It's not like the Ravens really needed their best players to be doing anything against the Jets. Baltimore versus Miami is going to be a hard-fought back-and-forth battle. Like I said, I think it's going to be a very defensive game. Devin Duvernay is going to be touchdown-dependent as they come. He had 4 targets on the day, did take it for 52 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is absolutely awesome. But I'm not banking on a guy that's got a low target share and is sharing the field with Mark Andrews, or sharing the field with Rashad Bateman. I mean, he had the same amount of targets as rookie tight end Isaiah Likely, right? Granted, Likely didn't pull any of them in. He didn't score any touchdowns. But yeah, I think Duvernay is just the boomer bust play, and I'm not going to trust him against Miami. So if you're watching this video, if you want to believe me, believe me. If you want to believe Tyler. But we do get to duke it out depending on Devin Duvernay's statistical line here. So Tyler, let's make a friendly wager here. I don't know what we're wagering, but we'll say anything under 10 points, I'm right. Anything over 10 points, you're right.
Sounds just for bragging rights. Sounds
yeah. Just for bragging rights. You know, when I call someone a sit, I expect them to get less than 10 points, unless it's a quarterback. Then I expect them to get less than 17 or whatever we classify as a sit. But I'll go ahead. I'll let you take over with your first sit of the week at the wide receiver position.
So my first sit of the week, and this one kind of feels like low-hanging fruit as I'm sitting here looking at it, but CeeDee Lamb against Cincy, for all the same reasons I said that Zeke should be a sit. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be vastly disappointing over the course of the next couple weeks. Cincinnati has a solid defense, solid enough to completely take Cooper Rush out of the game. And yeah, if CeeDee Lamb struggled this past week with Dak, I really am not excited to see how it's going to go for the remainder of this season. Yeah, there's every time I talk about it, I just get choked up and upset. But yeah, outside of a deep flex spot, I'm not, like I said, I'm not really starting anybody on this Dallas offense.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because a lot of people don't really have the option to sit CeeDee Lamb, because I mean, if you have him, he's probably one of, if not the center of your dynasty team. And if we're talking redraft, he's probably your wide receiver 1, right? So it's such a tough thing to imagine. If you have the depth to do it, I completely agree, so I like that call. It hurts, but I do like the call to kind of err on the side of caution with CD, right? My next sit of the week at the wide receiver position is going to be Amari Cooper versus the Jets. The Cleveland Browns are playing the Jets this weekend, and Amari Cooper was blanketed by J.C. Horn, right? Granted, he would have had a bigger day if a couple of penalties didn't happen, but he had 3 catches for 18 yards, essentially against a rookie cornerback, right? Like, this was J.C. Horn's 4th game ever, because he got hurt last year in week 3. And I mean, if Amari Cooper was struggling against J.C. Horn, I think he's going to struggle just as much against the Jets corners. They've got a good little tandem back there, especially with Sauce Gardner, right? I think Sauce is going to be taking the markup on Amari Cooper. I think this is actually going to be a fairly close game, to be completely honest with you. But the Jets' run defense is nothing to write home about. So I think the Browns are going to take the approach, kind of like they did against Carolina, and just make it the Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt show. So for that reason, Amari Cooper, definitely a big sit for me. I think this entire game is just going to run straight through the running backs.
Yeah, unless you can buy him for a 6th-round pick like the Browns did, I would recommend staying away from him for a little while. But my second sit of the week is going to be a guy who I really like and actually blew up for me last week, Christian Kirk against Indy. like I said, showed up like I thought he would, but I'm just expecting more of a running back attack here from the Jags. James Robinson showed that he's healthy, and I mean Travis Etienne was a bit disappointing and with what we saw, but expecting improvements out of him, and it wouldn't surprise me if this just became a grinded out type of game. And I don't really like Christian Kirk's odds this week to have a lot of opportunity. I mean, Indy slows the clock down every week, right? So it's tough to start a receiver against them, especially a guy who we've really only seen blow up, this week and be a number one receiver this week. So I'm going to sit Christian Kirk here, even though I'm definitely stashing him on the bench. I think he's going to be productive for the rest of the season. Just don't think it's a very good matchup for him.
Yeah, and I think Kirk is going to draw a lot of Stephon Gilmore coverage, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I think that it's tough, right? Because he had such a productive week one, but I don't completely agree, but I definitely don't disagree, right? Christian Kirk's one of those like guys that I'm kind of just throwing at a dartboard for the weekend, right? So definitely, I do like the call there. Definitely err on the side of caution with him. We'll go ahead and move on over to our tight ends. And, we each only got one for starts and sits because, again, tight end is not nearly as deep as all the other positions. We might move, going forward, we might just do one start at quarterback and one sit at quarterback, right? Because it's just kind of, we both put Daniel Jones in as sits, right? Like, could probably figure that out, right? So we'll probably fade it down to just one quarterback and one tight end apiece. But nonetheless, here are our starting tight ends for the week, and mine's going to be Robert Tonyan versus the Bears on that Sunday night football game. Like I said, Aaron Rodgers going to bounce back in a big way. Robert Tonyan is going to see an increased snap share in this one. Rodgers needs someone that's going to score touchdowns for him, not named A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. And that's going to be Robert Tonyan. Rewind the clock a couple years ago, Tonyan had double-digit touchdowns. I called it, I guess a month ago in one of our other videos where I thought Tonyan could come in this season and be a threat for double-digit touchdowns. And with how that offense looked in week one, they're going to need him to do it. And I think he will. So I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see Tonyan go out there, score at least one touchdown against the Chicago Bears on Sunday night when Aaron Rodgers is going to go out there and have a lot to prove.
Yeah, and my guy for this one is going to be a part of the Chargers offense here, Gerald Everett. He's a guy who last week he definitely helped out some fantasy teams. If you ended up in your starting lineup, you were happy with the 15 points that he got you. 4 targets, 3 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Like I said, this one's only going to go up. Again, going to be a massive shootout. I'll take any piece of this offense that I can. Gerald Everett's probably the cheapest piece. If you don't have a solid, top 3, top 4 tight end that you're starting week in and week out, and you're one of the teams that's, got a bottom half of the league tight end, I think Gerald Everett's going to be a guy who you'll regret not starting for the first couple games of the season if you leave him on your bench. So I'm gonna take him here, and I'm gonna take the piece of this shootout that I think is about to blow up here.
Yeah, and you know what? It's important to note too that Keenan Allen's not playing. And Keenan Allen is really the only guy that's going to compete with Everett in the red zone for those big, meaningful targets, right? So I think Gerald Everett is definitely a threat to score a touchdown in this one. And to your point, he looked good in week 1. He'll look even better in week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's going to be an absolute shootout. Anyone that you can slot into your lineup within reason from either of these teams is going to be a pretty good play. So love the Gerald Everett call. And then we'll get into our final 2 guys here of the video, and that's going to be our sits at tight end. I mentioned that Matt Stafford was a start, but I'm not starting his tight end. I'm not starting Tyler Higbee. Kind of mentioned it earlier that he had 11 targets in week 1, and I think he's going to lose a lot of them. And I think Allen Robinson's going to gain a lot of them. Tyler Higbee's a guy who's going to go out there 4 to 6 targets tops this week, right? I don't think he's going to be heavily used or heavily relied on against the Falcons. I really wouldn't expect many of the pass catchers to be doing very much at all in the fourth quarter, but I digress there. Tyler Higbee's just not a guy that I'm very excited about. I think Stafford wants to get this offense moving a lot more effectively than they did in week 1, and it's not going to come by dumping it off to Tyler Higbee. So I'm despite him having a massive target share in week 1, I'm going to fade him against the Falcons in week 2.
Yeah, for sure. Can't blame you there. And my last guy for this video, my sit for the tight end, is going to be Hunter Henry versus Pittsburgh. I just see this one being a slow, grinded out type of game. This one's not going to be very high scoring, and it's definitely if anybody's going to be productive, I don't think it's going to be Hunter Henry. I'm expecting to see a lot more of the Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris show this week coming up. And against Pittsburgh, it's just two slow offenses, and that's all you really need to know. I don't want the tight end that's a part of that game.
Yeah, I agree. And, even with TJ Watt out for the Steelers defense still has a lot going on for them. I mean, they picked off Joe Burrow 4 times. They held them to 20 total points, pull it out the upset win, right? And I think they've got a lot of momentum coming in. And Mac Jones, I mean, I know the x-rays came back negative and he should be on pace to play in week 2, but he hurt his back in week 1. And you just really got to wonder how that's going to affect the offense moving forward. So like the call there. Before we wrap up this video, promised you I would be doing this every single week. It's the streams of the week for kickers and defense, if you're into that sort of thing. So the guys that I'm highlighting here, as always, it's going to be kickers and defenses that are owned typically around 50% or less in most leagues out there. And the kicker of the week is going to be Ryan Suckup of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Saints. Tom Brady has struggled immensely against the Saints since joining the Buccaneers. Like, I don't think he's beat them once. That's how bad the Saints have his number. So in week 1, Tom Brady was kind of struggling out there against the Dallas defense, right? And they had to rely on Ryan Suckup to kick a lot of field goals. Kind of think it's going to happen again in this one. So Suckup's going to be my stream of the week for the kickers. And then my defense, this is a cop-out. I know it's a cop-out, but they're owned in like 40% of leagues out there. It's the Cincinnati Bengals against Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys. I don't think I need to explain this one. Probably enough said just when I brought up Cooper Rush. So if Cincinnati's out there on your waiver wires and you play with the defense, you have to add them immediately because they're going to score a gajillion points. Sorry, Tyler, but I think you can admit that as well.
No, I mean, it's tough when you look at literally the number 1 offense in the league last year and how excited you have to be for fantasy when one of their number 1 receivers leaves and there's so many more options to pick up in the league. And then he gets hurt. Your quarterback gets hurt. So, I mean, it sucks, but it's something that we have to talk about. And, I mean, there's probably still people out there who are believing that, Zeke is still going to finish probably as a top 10 running back and CeeDee Lamb's going to be a wide receiver 1 and not buying it at all anymore. So, yeah, definitely you could stream whoever's playing Dallas for the next, 5 to 6 weeks till Dak's back.
Yeah, I think so too. Sorry to say that, buddy. But that's going to do it for us here on our starts and sits. Thanks for sticking with us. Our next video, we are back to a bit more Dynasty content, right? Obviously, we're doing our weekly start sits, but later on this week, we do have a video coming out for you guys. It's going to be some buy low options in Dynasty leagues ahead of week 2. So we're aiming to get that out either on Friday or Saturday of this week, kind of give you a glimpse as to some guys that maybe you should go out and buy ahead of week 2 or beyond, right? But yeah, so if you like this video, leave a like. If you have something to say or you have a specific start sit question for week 2, feel free to comment it or join our Discord and put it on in there. Tyler and I are always answering questions in there and through our comments. And yeah, we just really enjoy hearing from you guys. So keep those comments coming. And most importantly, if you want to see more of our videos, hit that subscribe button. Every subscribe is a big help for us. We have a lot of fun doing this channel and we want to grow it as much as we possibly can. So would really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. But hey, if you're not sold, tune in on Friday or Saturday. Maybe we can sell you next time.
And I hope that we didn't ruin your week last week. And I hope we help you out this week.
Exactly. That's all we do. We aim to please here on that Dynasty show. But for myself, for Tyler, and for that Dynasty show, we will see you next time.